Many people know Jack Wagner as the voice of Disneyland, a title he held for decades, and his voice is quite well known actually, even now, 25 years after he died. And he's far more tied to Disney than simply Disneyland. Let's take a look back at Jack Wagner and his impact on Disney Parks history. Well, hello there. My name's Jeremy and welcome back to Freeform Disney, where I talk about all aspects of Disney, from the animated movies to the theme parks to Star Wars, Marvel, and Pixar, and the TV shows, and everything else in between. And that is why it's Freeform. And keep coming back every day for new daily content. If you're not subscribed yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Today it's time for another journey through Disney parks and Disneyland history as we take a look at the voice of Disneyland, Jack Wagner.
Welcome to the Magic Kingdom of Disneyland.
Now I can spend this whole video just playing clips of Jack Wagner talking.
Today we're open until midnight.
But I want to give you some information about his life and involvement with Disney. So maybe we'll just sprinkle some audio clips throughout this.
Thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful and memorable visit in this happy place called Disneyland.
He has selected music for the parks, done voices for numerous of the famous characters, voiced thousands of park announcements for different Disney parks, and also been an important voice for many other things around the world, as well as having been an actor, a famous DJ, and talk show host. Wow! I mean, he's done quite a lot, or did quite a lot in his life, I should say. Don Dorsey, who I've talked about a little before here in relationship to Disney, he apprenticed with Jack Wagner for 2 years and talked about how unique Jack Wagner is in terms of his huge range of audio skills. Jack Wagner can do dubbing, he can find background music, he can create sound effects, he can mix all of this, he can do narration. He's like the one-man band of audio creation in this sense. Really impressive. There has been talk from other people that I've run across where they talked about how he could do a $10,000 job that required at least 3 different specialists at a studio, all by himself for as little as $500. And those dollar amounts are from decades ago, so multiply that by a little bit.
Please remove a D coupon from your ticket book and present it to the conductor before boarding the train.
Now, if you know Jack Wagner's voice, the way he described how he could always be so upbeat was that he was kind of a hyper guy, up all the time, rarely tired, because he's just always got that pep, that pizzazz in his voice, and it just always draws you in. And he also has that authority to make you listen when he gives those safety announcements, right?
Please remain seated and keep your hands and arms inside the Skyway cabin.
So Jack Wagner was born way back in December 17th, 1925. Now his parents were both French-born and both were musicians, so the whole music bug definitely was a family thing right there. And not just music. At age 4, he was dubbing American movies into French for foreign release. And starting as a teenager, he became an MGM contract player. In the 1950s, he's off on TV, he's off in The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. He did 144 episodes as the malt shop proprietor. He's also in Dragnet and Sea Hunt, The Ann Southern Show, and more. And more than just all that, he is at this point in time in the 50s a top-ranked LA radio personality over on KNX in Los Angeles. And he had his own interview show called Hollywood on a Silver Platter that was syndicated to 1,200 and more radio stations worldwide. Wow, so he was already huge as we're getting to the 50s, where Disneyland goes ahead and opens. And think about this, he was a huge, very well-respected LA radio personality in 1955. So, did he get invited to that opening? You better bet. He was invited to Disneyland's grand opening. And given all that, it might not be the biggest surprise how he got into doing some of the guest announcing for Disneyland over the next many years, well, decades. So he would do some of that guest narration for Christmas parades, other special programs and whatnot during that time. He was not the voice of Disneyland at this point.
And just a reminder, there is no smoking, food, or drinks. Thank you.
Now in 1970, Jack Wagner was between jobs at the time. And, well, he heard a little bit about this big park that was getting built by Disney over in Florida. And so he contacted some people he knew, and, well, lo and behold, they found something. So they were looking for some background music for the parks. Now, at the time, he made this comment that Main Street USA, you know what kind of music they had playing there? Mrs. Robinson. Yeah, Simon and Garfunkel's Cuckoo Cachoo Mrs. Robinson was playing on Main Street USA. I gotta admit, I find that hard to imagine. I'm so used to Main Street USA really having this sound and this feel. But it didn't back then in 1970. It just wasn't the case. And Jack Wagner is the one to really thank for that. He went ahead and found the turn-of-the-century music for Main Street USA and gave it that background. And they loved it so much, they also had him get background music for around 40 different theme areas around the parks. Now, this is not something everybody talks about when we talk about Jack Wagner. This is huge. So when you think about those background soundtracks that fade away but also are so important in setting the moods within the Disney parks, Jack Wagner was instrumental in that. A few weeks later, the Disney executives, they approached him and asked if he would do the park's daily announcements. And guess what? They'd actually already hired somebody else for the job, but they loved Jack Wagner so much that when he said yes to that, they're like, dump the other guy, we're bringing Jack Wagner in instead. Now, the official title was Park Announcer, but as we'll call him, the Voice of Disneyland.
Due to technical difficulties, we have momentarily stopped all bobsleds. This is a normal, routine procedure, and an attraction host or hostess will be at your bobsled shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelt fastened. Thank you for your cooperation.
Now, over time, one of the really intriguing things that happened is that Jack Wagner owns a house about 2 miles away from Disneyland itself, and his house has this great sound studio in it. And Disney went ahead and set up this cool direct audio link from his studio all the way over to Studio D inside Disneyland itself. So that way, Jack Wagner could just simply record whatever he did there and it would be connected right over into Disneyland so they could go get it right out on the announcements. So it's as simple as giving Jack Wagner up a call, he would go record it, and boom, done. Really impressive. And this worked well with Jack Wagner too, because he and his wife really didn't travel much. They stayed there a lot. And Jack Wagner apparently would say that a lot of his time during his life, he would spend recording at home, doing all of that. So it was pretty easy to get a hold of him for those last minute items as well. Oh, and an interesting note, that direct audio link right there was one of the first direct audio links like that in the entire world set up with a remote recording studio. So that's pretty cool right there too. Now you might ask, well, how many things does he really end up having to record in a week or in a day? Well, it could actually be a lot. There were cases where he recorded more than 1,000 Disney parks announcements in a single week. Dying. There were even times where a typical day would be at least 30. You just don't think of that many announcements going out for the parks, but yeah. And then all those different special event things or things that would change a little bit. They have any kind of special guest visiting, if there are weather issues that close the park early, etc., etc., etc. There's a ton. And on top of all that, he also recorded things for parades, for announcements, for training videos, all kinds of different things. Another spot you probably know his voice, the Main Street Electrical Parade, because in 1977, he co-arranged and updated the music and also voiced the opening section for the parade.
The Main Street Electrical Parade.
Now, in case you thought that was all he did, nope. For some time, he actually did a whole bunch of different character voices like Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck and Goofy and Chip and Dale, and actually a whole bunch more. The Disney on Ice program, there was actually some time where he did all the voices for all 18 character voices in the program. Eventually, well, he had to cut back. He was just having to do too much as more and more parks were opening. Because, guess what? He was voicing things for Disneyland, Walt Disney World, Tokyo Disneyland for the English section, as well as Euro Disneyland, now Disneyland Paris. And for that, he did both French and English because he happened to know French well enough. Dying! On top of some other work, because he said Disney made up about 80% of the work he did. But don't feel too bad for him. As Jack Wagner would say, it's a dream job for him. And on top of all that, He made a salary somewhere between $100,000 and $700,000 a year for his Disney work. Not everything else, but just for the Disney work. Ooh, dying man. So don't feel too bad. Heck, he owned 4 different houses out there down in Southern California. He was doing pretty well. And on top of all of this, let's talk about some of his outside work for a moment. Famously, one of the places you can hear him was the Orlando International Airport. And really, up until not too many years ago, you really could still hear him there, especially on the tram as you get on that and go around. Also, he did things like Pentagon proposals, pharmaceutical equipment, and more that way.
So take advantage of our great 4th of July week 10-cent color print special.
Or say police departments, fire departments, and schools. He actually gave discounted prices to them for quite a while, but he had to limit it a bit because he became so popular because of his discounted prices. And so with tons of training things and whatnot for them too. Other things he did, he would do the Christmas tree lighting ceremony every year down at New York City's South Street Seaport. He did 7 Super Bowl halftimes. He went ahead and narrated Ronald Reagan's first inaugural fireworks show down in D.C. and a whole lot more.
My friends and I want to thank you for coming today, and we look forward to seeing you next year with a whole new show, Walt Disney's Great Ice Hopping.
So his voice is all kinds of places, heard by billions of people. Now you can imagine he started having to cut back as time went on as the Disney load got heavier and heavier, as I alluded to earlier. Now, one of the interesting things is how many people it took to replace him. For instance, at Disney on Ice that I referenced way back, where he was even doing all 18 character voices, well, when he stopped doing it, they took 6 people to replace him on it, which, well, was a bit of an ego stroke for him, as he put it. Oh, yeah, pretty cool. Wow. Now, as time went on, he officially became the voice of Disneyland in 1970, and the parks became completely inundated with Jack Wagner over the next couple of decades.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, in just a few minutes, the lights all over Disneyland will be dimmed so you may fully experience our nightly fireworks spectacular, Fantasy in the Sky.
Now, in 1991, he had to have vocal cord surgery, which led to a quasi-retirement for him. Now, that said, he still made some short announcements on occasion after that in the next few years. And then in 1995, he died from a heart attack suddenly, June 16th. Now, in the ensuing years, his announcements have lasted for a long time. Although, by now, most have been replaced. But you still can hear his voice at least in one spot, the Matterhorn bobsleds at Disneyland.
Remain seated, please. Permanecer sentados, por favor.
So you can still hear him there. And he's starting to fade more into the background, but there's so many people that know him so well even now. That said, nowadays there is a new voice of Disneyland, Bill Rogers. And across the way, the voice of California Adventures is currently Camille Dixon. And perhaps we'll do a video about that husband-wife duo sometime in the future. As for the other parks, they all have people they contract out to, and it's often a mishmash of people's voices at this point. It's not the era where it seemed to be Jack Wagner doing most everything for a while. So there was a time period where Jack Wagner was more than just the voice of Disneyland. He seemed to be the voice of Disney for a while. And Disney finally recognized him too. In 2005, Disney posthumously inducted him as a Disney legend. And Jack Wagner is now a part of Disneyland history.
Ladies and gentlemen, Disneyland has now ended its normal operating day. We hope you've enjoyed your visit to the Magic Kingdom and that you'll be back with us again soon.
And it's that time. Let me ask, well, what about you? Do you have any strong memories associated with Jack Wagner's voice? And is he still the voice of Disneyland for you? Or are you more used to Bill Rogers now? Let me know down below in the comments. And thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please give it a like, share it with anyone you think will too, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done it already. I'll see you back here tomorrow for another new episode of Freeform Disney. Have a magical day, and may the Force be with you always.